Siddhartha begins with a young man who has everything: intelligence, privilege, a spiritual education, and the respect of everyone around him. He is destined to become a great Brahmin priest, but he is not satisfied. He feels that all the teachings, rituals, and wisdom of his elders are second-hand knowledge. He wants direct experience of enlightenment. So he leaves. He abandons his family, joins wandering ascetics, starves himself, meditates for years, and pushes his body to the edge of death. He masters self-denial. And still, he does not find what he is looking for. Enlightenment cannot be reached through suffering any more than through comfort. Hermann Hesse published Siddhartha in 1922, drawing on Buddhist and Hindu philosophy to tell a story about the journey toward wisdom. The book is short, poetic, and deceptively simple. It has sold millions of copies and remains one of the most popular spiritual novels ever written. If you are interested in books about finding meaning through experience rather than doctrine, subscribe to SnapOldWisdom. We break down the philosophy and literature that matter. Subscribe now and let us get into why Siddhartha had to live the wrong life before he could find the right one. After leaving the ascetics, Siddhartha meets the Buddha himself. The Buddha teaches that suffering comes from desire and can be ended through the Eightfold Path. Siddhartha listens respectfully, but does not become a follower. He tells the Buddha that his teaching is perfect, internally consistent, and complete. But it is still just teaching. Siddhartha says wisdom cannot be communicated. You can teach knowledge, facts, doctrines, but wisdom must be experienced directly. No one can hand it to you. This is the core insight of the book. You cannot shortcut the journey. You have to live it. So Siddhartha walks away from the Buddha and decides to learn from the world instead of from teachers. He crosses a river with the help of a ferryman who says the river has much to teach. Siddhartha does not understand yet. He enters the city and encounters Kamala, a beautiful courtesan. Kamala tells him he cannot be with her unless he becomes wealthy and refined. Siddhartha has spent years mastering meditation and self-denial, but he knows nothing about money, business, or pleasure. So he learns. He becomes a merchant, makes a fortune, dresses in fine clothes, and becomes Kamala's lover. This is where the book surprises people. Most spiritual stories are about renouncing the world. Siddhartha does the opposite. He dives into wealth, sex, gambling, and indulgence. He lives this way for 20 years. At first, he treats it as a game, observing himself from a distance. But gradually, he becomes trapped. He starts to care about money. He gets addicted to gambling. He drinks too much. He grows fat, lazy, and numb. The detachment he cultivated as an ascetic disappears. He becomes just another ordinary person chasing pleasure and avoiding pain. He has learned what desire feels like from the inside. One day, Siddhartha looks at himself and feels disgusted. He has wasted decades. He leaves the city, abandons his wealth, and wanders back to the river where he first crossed. He considers drowning himself. He leans over the water, ready to let go, and hears a sound. Om, the sacred syllable from his youth. The sound pulls him back. He realizes that even in his despair, life is still pulling him forward. He falls asleep by the river and wakes up changed. His old friend Govinda, now a Buddhist monk, finds him and does not recognize him. Siddhartha has been transformed by failure. Siddhartha stays by the river and apprentices himself to Vasudeva, the ferryman. Vasudeva barely speaks. He just listens to the river. Siddhartha begins to do the same. The river becomes his teacher. It flows constantly, but is always the same. It is everywhere at once. Past, present, and future exist simultaneously in its movement. Years pass. Siddhartha learns to listen. One day, Kamala appears, traveling to see the Buddha before he dies. She is bitten by a snake and dies in Siddhartha's arms. She leaves behind their son, a boy Siddhartha never knew existed. Siddhartha tries to raise him, but the boy is spoiled, angry, and resentful. The boy eventually runs away, stealing money from Siddhartha and Vasudeva. Siddhartha chases after him, but realizes he cannot force his son to stay. He has to let him go, just as his own father let him go. The wound of losing his son stays with Siddhartha for a long time. It is his final lesson in attachment. Vasudeva tells Siddhartha to listen to the river. Siddhartha listens and hears all the voices of existence: joy, sorrow, laughter, screaming, birth, death. He hears the unity beneath the multiplicity. He realizes that time is an illusion. Everything that has ever happened is still happening. The river taught him what the Buddha could not. Vasudeva sees that Siddhartha has reached enlightenment and walks into the forest to die. Siddhartha becomes the ferryman. At the end of the book, Govinda returns, still seeking enlightenment after decades of following the Buddha's teaching. He does not recognize Siddhartha and asks for wisdom. Siddhartha tells him that seeking is what prevents finding. Words and teachings cannot convey truth, because truth is not conceptual. It is experiential. Govinda asks Siddhartha to teach him. Siddhartha says he cannot. Instead, he tells Govinda to kiss his forehead. When Govinda does, he sees all of existence in Siddhartha's face. Every form, every moment, all at once. He finally understands. So what is the book actually saying? First, that wisdom cannot be taught, only lived. You can study every spiritual text, follow every rule, and meditate for decades, and still miss the point. Understanding comes through direct experience, including failure, suffering, and confusion. Second, that all paths lead to the same place if walked honestly. Siddhartha finds enlightenment not through asceticism or indulgence, but through experiencing both fully and then transcending them. The river represents this. It flows in all directions at once, containing everything. Third, that time is an illusion. The river is always the same river, even though the water is always different. Siddhartha, as a young Brahmin, as a wealthy merchant, as a broken man, and as an enlightened ferryman, are all the same person existing simultaneously. Separation is the illusion. Unity is the truth. Hesse wrote Siddhartha during a personal crisis. His marriage was failing. He was in psychoanalysis, and World War I had shattered his faith in European civilization. He turned to Eastern philosophy for answers and wrote this book as a synthesis of what he found. It is not authentic Buddhism or Hinduism. It is Hesse's interpretation, filtered through Western individualism. The book became massively popular in the 1960s during the counterculture movement. People read it as a rejection of materialism and a guide to spiritual seeking. Hesse won the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1946, partly for this book. It has been translated into dozens of languages and never gone out of print. Critics of the book argue that it romanticizes Eastern philosophy without understanding it deeply. Others say it is too individualistic, ignoring the communal and ethical dimensions of Buddhism. Some point out that Siddhartha's journey is only possible because he is male, privileged, and free to wander. A woman or a lower caste person could not have done the same. These criticisms are valid, but the book still resonates because the central question is real. Can you learn wisdom from books and teachers, or do you have to make your own mistakes? Siddhartha says you have to make the mistakes, not because suffering is noble, but because understanding requires lived experience. Here is what you do with this book. First, stop expecting teachers to give you answers. They can point the way, but you have to walk the path. If you are waiting for someone to hand you enlightenment, you will wait forever. Wisdom is not transferred. It is earned through experience. Second, do not fear going the wrong direction. Siddhartha spent 20 years as a merchant and gambler. Those years were not wasted. They taught him what indulgence feels like from the inside. Without that experience, his later enlightenment would have been incomplete. Sometimes the detour is the path. Third, learn to listen instead of seeking. Siddhartha stops seeking when he starts listening to the river. The river does not give him answers. It shows him that the questions were wrong. The search for enlightenment is itself the obstacle. When you stop searching and start experiencing, you find what you are looking for. The writing style is simple and rhythmic, almost hypnotic. Hesse uses repetition and imagery to create a meditative quality. The river, the Om sound, the wheel of existence. These symbols recur and deepen with each appearance. The book is meant to be experienced, not just read. If you have not read it, the book is around 150 pages and very readable. It is not a philosophical treatise. It is a story. But the story contains philosophy. Siddhartha's journey from certainty to confusion to wisdom mirrors the spiritual path many people recognize in their own lives. Hesse died in 1962 at age 85. He wrote many other books, including Steppenwolf and The Glass-Bead Game, but Siddhartha remains his most widely read work. It speaks to something universal, the desire to understand life directly, without mediation, and the recognition that the journey is never what you expected. Here is the bottom line. Siddhartha is about a man who rejects every teacher, including the Buddha, because he believes wisdom cannot be taught. He lives multiple lives: ascetic, merchant, lover, father, ferryman. Each phase teaches him something words could not convey. At the end, he finds enlightenment not through doctrine, but through listening to a river. The book says you cannot shortcut experience. You have to live the wrong life before you can find the right one. Wisdom is not knowledge. It is recognition. And it comes when you stop seeking and start listening. The river flows. The ferryman listens. And somewhere in that listening, the separation between self and world dissolves. That is what Siddhartha found. That is what the book offers. Not answers, but an invitation to stop looking for them and start experiencing what is already here.